In this video, we are going to talk about class variables. Now, you know that we have three main types of variables comes under uh, variables in a class, right? So we discuss about these things. So data members, we have three types: class variables, instant variables, and local variables. So we are already familiar with instant variables and local variables. So let me discuss about class variables. Now, class variable is a special type of variable comes under, as I mentioned, a class. So how we are going to identify always a class variable will be declared outside the class. I mean, inside the class, but outside any method, right? So what's the specialty about a class variable? Now, you know, when there are like instant variables, right? When there's an instant variable in a uh, class, when you're going to create an object from that class, those instance variables will be created as copies for each and every object, right? So each and every object has its own copy of uh, instant variables, right? But when it comes to a class variable, what's the specialty? No matter how many objects that you are going to create from a class, there will be only one class variable, right? So if you declare class variable, that class variable will be shared by all the variables of that class, right? If you are going to create a particular class variable, that class variable will be shared by all the uh, objects created from that class, right? So that's the specialty about this one. For example, now here I'm going to define a class variable, and I'm going to show you how we can use this class variable in order to count the number of objects that we are going to create from a particular class, right? So we have the rectangle class and we have the constructor. So we have two parameters like the height and width. And first inside the constructor, those height and width is set to the past parameters. And thereafter, I'm going to print like this should be rectangle. Now I'm going to print the count, right? Constructor called count, and count, I'm going to print the rectangle dot count. Now there's a specialty about the class variable. When you're going to refer class variable inside the method or a constructor, you have to call it by class name dot whatever the class variable name, right? Not self dot is like instant variable, but when you are going to refer a class variable inside the method, you have to call it like a class variable dot the class variable name, right? Now I'm going to print it, and thereafter at each constructor call, I'm going to increase the variable count by 1, right? So let me create one object from the rectangle class. So then you are going to see the count is 0. Then you are going to create another one, the count will be 1, and you are going to create the next one, the count will be 2. So no matter how many variables you are going to create. Now this actually proves that there will be only one class variable per class, right? Why? Otherwise, this was a instant variable, right? What happens? Now, since this is shared by each and every object, no matter where you are going to, when you are going to increase this count, it affects to this count variable, right? So that means it's a class variable, right? So that means the same variable is shared by all the objects that you are going to create from that class, right? So if you can't understand that, let me do something like this. So I'm going to change this for self, like, and so self, everything self. Now this now becomes simply what? This now becomes a instant variable, right? So let me run this and show you what happens. Right? Now every time the class variable count is 0. Why? Now when you are going to create the rectangle one, its own count will be created, right? So when you are going to print, the count is not initialized, so it will be 0. Then you are going to increase it by 1. So you are going to increase the count of the rectangle 1 here, right? But when you are going to create another object, since this is an instant variable, another separate count will be created for rectangle. So that value is 0, right? Again, a new count will be created for rectangle too. So when you are going to have like this kind of what instant variables, right? That means instant variables will be created like copies for each and every object. But what's the different here? Now this is a class variable. That means one count variable there for each and every, I mean all the objects. So when you are going to increase it by one at each class, each constructor call, that's done for the common count, right? So then you are going to see like it's increasing like this when you are going to create uh, object from that class rectangle, right? Understood? So that's simply what you are going to understand by class variables. So that's how you can use class variables, and class variables can use for different applications. You can think about them. But for example, I showed you how we can use a class variable to count the number of objects created. So thank you, and we will next meet on a new topic called class inheritance. Thank you very much.